Hello, welcome to our classical music improvisation channel. I'm Robert from the Scroll Ensemble. I'm so glad you're here for our newest challenge, which will start in a week. Stay up to date by subscribing to our channel and help us out by supporting us on Patreon. As I've said in earlier videos, some part of classical music improvisation is about learning patterns and then using them creatively in written music. The learning part is often, well, the boring part, and I've seen it's an obstacle for many people. So with this challenge, we challenge you to learn just a few of those patterns, 1 or 2 every day, and we will help you with that by just being here and doing it with you. And of course, there are all these millions of other people who are doing it together with you as well. And after our challenge, you'll have those patterns in the pocket forever, hopefully. Besides the learning of these patterns, we will also experiment with using them on a real chanson from the 16th century, so it's going to be heaps of fun. I think it's possible to do this without any improvisation experience. The patterns are generally very small and simple, so, well, you can do it. In this video, I'll talk a bit about diminutions and our approach. And in our other video from this week, we will have a little play-along file for the beginning of Un Gai Berger. It's good to familiarize yourself with this chanson, play it through several times, and practice ornamenting only with rhythm, so you learn to add notes without getting lost. How do you do that? Check out this little video about that. A diminution is basically an ornament. We diminute a longer note into several notes of smaller value. A musician was often judged on their ability to do this well, rather than just their playing. And there are several reasons for adding such diminutions, like to add grace to the music, to show off your virtuosity, or on an instrument to express the text more clearly. And more about diminutions in this very clear, wonderful video by Early Music Sources. In the past, we find books filled with examples of how to do this. Generally, the book will give you a tiny bit of music, a skeletal melody, and then tell you a diminution that you could replace it with. When you go to play your real music, you will hopefully recognize these bits of skeletal melody and remember the diminution that you have learned earlier, and then you can just put it in place. We find books back discussing this idea from the 16th century well into the 18th, with a particular hotspot around the end of the 16th century in Italy. In this challenge, we are using Adriano Banchieri's Cartella Musicale from the turn of the century. If you like this approach, we will happily do other books as well, and in longer runs, so let us know if that is the case in the comments. Banchieri was a monk all of his life, and he wrote a lot of music, mostly sacred, but there are also some interesting magical collections with an overarching story, using elements of Commedia dell'arte. Banchieri wrote several books about performance practice and composition, and one of these is this Cartella Musicale. I chose this book for our first such challenge because we're using it for a concert in August, but also because many of the other books focus on tiny molecules of melody, sometimes even just one interval, bo, bo, and then they give you a lot of notes to play on it. But when you just get started, it's quite overwhelming to try to put all those notes in. Banchieri generally gives longer skeletal melodies and then also smaller, simpler diminutions. So I think it will be easier to start off with, and perhaps therefore also more rewarding. Banchieri writes a few interesting remarks about his 100 suggested diminutions. What is different about his approach is that he didn't write the diminutions himself, but took them from composed music by famous authors of his time. So he basically reverse engineered them and wrote the underlying basic melody himself. So then he gives you an example of how you might ornament that same melody. He also says he didn't write where he got the music from because many of these diminutions were used by several authors. And one might claim it was theirs if Banchieri had written it was another's. This is just to say that he's trying to use skeletal melodies that can be found in many works of the time. He also includes the texts, which is nice for practicing these diminutions as singers, but also for us instrumentalists, it gives the melodic snippets a bit more meaning and shape. Banchieri took these diminutions from different voice types. So, for example, the final 25 diminutions are for bass singer. I haven't come across that before. Let me know if I'm wrong about this. He does say in his explanation that you can use them interchangeably, so for other voice types. So he isn't saying that a particular voice type should have particular types of diminutions. I chose un gai berger to practice our diminutions because it was used by several other writers to show examples of diminutions. It is still quite famous today, but mostly it is just quite simple to play it, and has quite a few of Banchieri's skeletal patterns. The text is a typical scene about a shepherd requesting the love of a shepherdess. On a side note, perhaps it's interesting to realize how special it is that we have such a wealth of information about diminutions. I've mentioned several times on this channel that we don't quite know how improvisations sounded in the past, and often learning was done from master to pupil with little evidence of what they did exactly surviving the test of time. In contrast, the art of diminution is one of the most well-documented improvisation approaches, including examples of what the end results may have sounded like. Let's end this video with some tough love from Maffei, a famous singer from the 16th century, and a hope-giving sentence from Banchieri. You should practice a lot and not stop after 2 failed attempts complaining that you just don't have talent. Learning these patterns will give the singer reputation. So join us next week, learn some patterns and work on your reputation.